right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Rear Wing Report. Welcome back to everybody to our third official recording. We are moving on. We got some exciting news to talk about for today. Do a little bit of a discussion about Red Bull's decision to replace Liam Lawson with Yuki. The implications for both of those drivers, the role of like the Visa Cash App RB team, but also talk about like some things like the status of Jack Doohan and Franco Colapinto with Alpine as well. We'll get a couple of updates from the Cadillac corner as well. And including some potential driver signings that we think may be happening for 2026. Okay, so welcome back, everybody, and hello, Steve.
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
I am fantastic, buddy. How are you?
Ugh, I'm breathing. I'm above ground. And it's race week, so finally we're good to go.
Oh yeah, last week was a long one. Too long of a weekend without race day.
Amen. Even though it's spring break, right?
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, very exciting news. Obviously, a lot happened while we were gone. I think the big news, right, is obviously that Ferrari made some updates with their. No, obviously, it's not the big news. Big news. What are we talking about today, Ryan? Why did we get on this pod?
We're talking about Red Bull and their decision to drop their driver 2 races into the season. And remember, everybody, you can always share your own opinions, talk about, what we say on this pod, and also your own developments. Follow our Instagram. Get ready for that. We're on Twitter, too. We're on TikTok, Rear Wing Report on Twitter and TikTok. Then we will also have our email down below as well, the rearwingpod@gmail.com. So send us your opinions, send us your thoughts. Easiest way to reach us, though, hit us up on IG. Okay, hit us up on IG. But, yeah, today, for our first segment, we are going to be talking all Red Bull. What happened? Wild, Steve, right? So, obviously, Lawson gets dropped. They demote him after just 2 races into the 2025 season. Replace him with Yuki, one of your favorite drivers. So yes. I know that's some exciting news for you. But what do you think, kind of like what the implications of this are? What does that mean for Lawson? How is this going to change his performance? Overall, what are your thoughts?
Well, my overall thoughts are very simple. It's about time. Right? When things started going south for Checo towards the end of last year, those last, I think, 8 or so races, they started having whispers of, really strong whispers of, hey, he's probably not going to be here next year. Even as we were approaching the end of Danny Ricciardo's time at Visa Cash App or Toro Rosso or whatever they called themselves last year, they were talking about Checo also not being there, and hey, maybe he'll be gone and Danny will be promoted. And it always seemed like to me the most clear path forward was put Yuki in the car, the Red Bull car that is, and let Liam be the Visa Cash App driver. Or if you want to see if Danny Rick can recapture his old form, put him in the Red Bull car for those last 11 races. You know that Checo's not going to be there, so why are we wasting any more time with him in that cockpit? Red Bull is the only team that essentially has 2 teams or 4 contracts, and they can move those drivers around, and they're not allowed to resist those moves. They can be told, too bad, you're doing it. Yuki confirmed that this week. And they asked him point blank, they said, could you have refused this? And he said, according to my contract, no. And so if you have the ability to do this and be flexible, you should have put Yuki in that car. And if you weren't going to put him in the car, then you should have put Liam in last year so that he had time to run up and get acclimated with the car. You had no chance of winning the Constructors Championship last year, so why not give him the time? Or use your brain, and at the end of the year, when you decide to let Checo go, put Yuki in. Christian Horner even said you can't have a guy in a support car for 5 years. Get him out of the support car. All of a sudden, 2 races into the season, oh, now he's ready? That's absolute garbage. They bungled it. They know it. And for once, I was right.
Yeah, you were right? You've been calling this for the past year now. We've kind of been mentioning Yuki and when is he going to get his opportunity to move into that number 2 seat and how's that going to be for him in the future. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, it's about time, but also like an interesting that kind of like just thinking about is, Checo kept saying last year, like, there are some performance issues, and I think that's been pretty clear over the past couple of weeks that there are performance issues with the car, and it's not. Last year Max could kind of mask that a little bit more, but we got a train going by, so this is gonna disrupt our audio here. But there's the conductor. Thanks for honking your horn 3 times. It's a little too loud, but anyways, with that, like, it almost seems like Checo could have potentially been a scapegoat, right? Just kind of be like, yeah, this isn't working, and he drove the wheels off of the car like a few years ago, right? They were able to win the constructors, and they were able to do the things that they were able to do, right? But last year he kept mentioning like there's issues with this, and so I don't think this is necessarily all on Liam, right? Like last week we talked about the idea of like giving the worst drive to an entire team, and I think absolutely like that is something that we can do, right? Like they really mucked it up. They really did. Just taking too long to make the decision. The last person that was successfully in that Red Bull other than Max Verstappen was Danny Ricciardo. And, you have Yuki, who has been consistently been the best, like, lower team, like a mid-pack team. He's been one of the best drivers. And, I am excited, though, for him in terms of, like, his future now. Like, how's this going to be? But I guess we'll see later on in the week and how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a Red Bull engineer, I am praying to God, or whatever I identify as God, that Yuki can somehow figure out how to drive this car. Because if he can't, then you have this long line of failures that have come after Daniel Ricciardo. And at some point, you have to look at it and go, hey, we have a problem. Either we've designed the car too far around Max, but even he's not really happy with the car, or we've kind of designed a crap car, but we also just have one of the 5 greatest race car drivers of all time to mask all those issues, right? And paint over all of our mistakes. And I would be hoping that it is the former and not the latter. But I think everybody there is on thin ice. Christian Horner is part of a long line of second driver succession that hasn't panned out, right? Checo Perez was there for the longest time. They gave him a contract, in the middle of last year, and then had to pay him more than $12 million, according to ESPN, to go away. Then they promote Lawson. He doesn't work. I mean, Daniel Kvyat, you have Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly. None of them stick around for more than a year and a half or so, and none of them look like they, know how to drive. But then they go to these other teams, and all of a sudden, hey, Alex Albon is consistently scoring points. Pierre Gasly is, on the podium in Brazil, and consistently challenging for points. Like, at some point, you have to wonder what's going on with the team. Do they know what they're doing?
Yeah, and if you're Sonoda, like, you're gonna find out real quick, like, what that answer is. How's this promotion gonna be? You never know, like, how it's gonna end up. And I don't know. This is a tricky one. Like, this could either make or break it for Yuki. And I think he would always have an opportunity at another team. I think there's a handful of drivers that Yuki is significantly better than. But just in terms of his future, what do you kind of see? Like, how do you see this rolling out for Yuki?
I'm so nervous for him. He is one of my favorite drivers, and I just don't. I hope it goes well, but if you look at the data, what faith do we have that it is going to go well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody talks about how difficult the car is to drive. It's a problem. It's a problem. Max says, "Oh well, I'm happy for Liam in the sense that he's going to the Visa Cash App team because it'll be an easier car to drive. He'll be faster." Like, your lead driver's telling you there's problems, and then we're bringing in a new guy. Man, like, I don't know. And I didn't even like their reasoning for bringing him in. They say, "Oh well, he's grown in his maturity." So they didn't choose him again. They didn't choose him at the end of last year, but 2 races in, he's mature enough. And they also talked about his experience, right, and how he'll help set up the car. he had that same experience. Like 2 races extra is not something that's going to change your mind and go, all right, yeah, now he's reached that magic number, right? Like I think all the other promotions from Toro Rosso or Visa Cash App were around like 23 to 30 races tops before they got moved up to Red Bull. And now all of a sudden, you know, Yuki's run like 85 races and now he's ready to go. It strikes me as he's going to a team that is in disarray ever since Christian Horner's incident at the beginning of last year. And I think that it's a house of cards that's quickly falling apart. So I hope he can salvage something, but I think it actually is a bad sign for his future. I think he's going to find himself on a backmarker team at the end of at the end of this season.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm fearful of. Hopefully, I don't. I wish that does not happen. For Yuki's sake, he does. But he does deserve this seat. You know, like you mentioned, it is about dang time that this does happen. Yeah. So overall, right, like talking about Yuki and his future, and we also got to talk Liam Lawson, how he's doing, and how he's going to be going with this new reassignment to the Racing Bulls. Like, where do you see like the potential impact on his like career's trajectory? Do you think that he's gonna have a positive or a rather like negative emotional response to that demotion? Do you think that's gonna impact and kind of like weigh in on him in this upcoming race?
Yeah, I think in a sense it has to. Once again, reading the ESPN and athletic stories, they had some quotes from him. He goes, "Yeah, I wasn't actually expecting that I was going to get replaced," um, which I mean, kind of surprised me when you heard his quote after the Australian Grand Prix. He said, I need time. Time's the one thing I don't have, though." But I think that overall it'll be a positive for him. The car is faster and a little bit easier to drive. It seems like at least over a single lap. So with his qualifying should be better. I mean, it can't be much worse. But I think he's just got to get through this week and kind of get through the awkwardness of, hey, I'm in a new team now, even though I'm basically still with the parent company. I've just been demoted. Swallow your pride and then just grab the bull by the horns as it is and try and make something of the rest of the season. I think overall it's going to be a good thing for him. Find a car that's a little bit easier, get used to F1 life, and he's raced at Japan before, so he should be familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that overall he's got to be looking forward to this opportunity to kind of go out there and prove people wrong in a new way. What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. It'll be exciting to kind of watch. Of course, like the bright lights are, even though he is on this little kid team, not kid team, but like a daughter team of Red Bull. Uh, it'll be interesting. But like one thing that I kind of like am considering is how is he going to match up with Isaac Hadjar? Like, where's he going to be in terms of his development with it, right? He's had a couple more races underneath his belt over Isaac, but I think it'll be interesting because, Isaac's comfortable with this car now, right? He has 2 races into it. Yeah, Max was saying, it is an easier car. Christian Horner is, he's making assumptions that, yeah, this is an easier car to drive. But it kind of brings up like an interesting point. You kind of alluded to this earlier, but what's the role of this team, this junior outfit that Red Bull has? Like, we're focusing so much on driver development, but do you want to like? And from my way of looking at this is, you've been demoted now to the junior outfit, right? That is focused on and has been for the longest time driver development, right? Do you think there's a possibility Liam will ever show up in a Red Bull car again?
I think there's a possibility because I think there's a very strong possibility that after next year, Max Verstappen is not in a Red Bull. Um, you know, but they baffled me at every turn.
Yeah.
Like when they were looking for I don't know why they didn't put him in this seat 2 years ago. Instead we got Nick DeVries, who looked completely out of place when they had Lawson sitting right there. And for some reason, they chose DeVries, who was much older at the time, and I mean, like, had a short shelf life. Like, he was already a very mature racer, and I think that was like the upside to him. But like you said, the junior team is about driver development. Why am I taking a driver who's kind of maxed out who he's going to be in DeVries and putting him in the seat when I have Lawson, and I should have just put him in then?
Right.
So like this whole thing snowballs back 2 or 3 years. But I think that if I was Liam Lawson, I would feel pretty confident that I'll get another shot at that Red Bull seat. There's already talk that Yuki is not seen as the long-term answer. He's just the stopgap for this year, and they're going to cut him loose. Um, you know, Max, I would bet that he, like I said, I think he's gone in a year and a half. And you know, if I'm an F1 driver, I feel confident that I can beat anybody else. So it's basically me versus Isaac Hadjar, and there's one seat open, possibly two. Um, so I think that's the mindset he has to have too, right?
Right.
If he goes in and says, "Hey, I'm never coming back," then I mean, he's done. Like, put him, put him away and call it an F1 career. Say thanks and kick him to the curb. So, what about you? Think
Yeah.
he'll be in there?
I doubt it.
Really?
I really do doubt it. I don't know. I don't think he'll ever make it back up to the main team.
So,
I think it'll be hard to recover from that. Like the overwhelming, like just the whole idea of your team principals saying that the engineering team observed that the psychological toll and the pressure of like being on the team is already impacting you, and you are 2 races into the season. I don't think you ever can kind of not there's not an issue with Liam's character, but I think the way that he kind of responded to it, it'll take a long time for him to actually see that development like kind of happen. And they can Christian Horner concluded like he was being asked to handle too much, right? So the moment was obviously
yeah.
way too big for him, right? And he didn't know how to respond to that accordingly. So I don't see a world where they do take another chance on him, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's a really good point about like now there's probably some sort of narrative out there like, oh, hey, he's mentally weak. But I mean, like the moment in the role was too big for Alex Albon, famously as well, got cut after about a year and a half, I think, in the Red Bull car.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, according to F1Planet.com and their rumor mill, allegedly Red Bull reached out to Alex Albon this offseason to see if he would be interested in coming back to Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
Can't confirm that, but I mean, that's what they have reported. Um, so I think, like, if you're a true F1 driver, talent, and you have talent, people will recognize that, and you'll get a drive.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, obviously, there's been a few. Logan Sargent, obviously number one, coming to mind, being the most talented who just doesn't have a drive for whatever reason. That is said with all sense of sarcasm for those of you who are new. Logan Sargent doesn't belong at an F1 track in an F1 car. But I think that, I mean, he showed a lot. Lawson showed a lot of ability, subbing for Ricardo after he broke his wrist. And then last year, stepping into the seat after Ricardo was unceremoniously kicked to the curb and told to
Evicted.
retire. Yeah. And I mean, he showed a lot of, ability in a short amount of time with that car. And I just think that if I'm him, I'm pissed at Red Bull. Like, hey, you put me in this situation. Like, you screwed me over, and you're the ones who screwed up, and now I'm the scapegoat. Checo was the scapegoat last year because you couldn't build a car, right? And I always go back to the Drive to Survive clip of Christian Horner yelling at Toto Wolff to fix your car, and they can't fix their car, and
Yeah.
they just keep scapegoating people. So, I mean, the better question might be, does he ever want to go back?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, we'll have to see like how that domino effect kind of plays out through the rest of the season for sure. one last thing that before we kind of move on out of like this segment where we've been talking about the role of like the RB, Cash App, Visa, whatever we call it, type of thing. Wherever moving on from there, but one thing that we didn't really mention here a few minutes ago was the idea of how this is going to shake up some other things in the grid, and I kind of wanted to quickly just mention real quick, like where do we stand with for Alpine as of right now? Talking about the full-time seat of Jack Doohan and the expectations that are kind of placed on him, and then that nice and young up-and-comer Franco Calapinto does his signing as a reserve driver for Alpine kind of throw that investment that was made secure to him? Does that throw it off for him? Does it do anything like that? Let's talk a little bit about Alpine.
Yeah, I mean Alpine, everybody's favorite forgotten F1 team of the year. But I feel like if I'm Jack Doohan, I got to be looking at the situation at Red Bull and kind of feeling the heat, on the back of my neck, with Colapinto coming in, especially. Uh, I just can't imagine that he's feeling very comfortable. Number one, number two, he sees someone, in a better seat than him get axed after two races for a guy that the team said they didn't even want,
Right.
right? And his best finish was 13th, I think, over three starts because he did get the start at the end of last year. He hasn't been especially close to, um, Pierre, and he retired in Australia. China didn't really make much of an impression. Um, so yeah, I think he's got to be worried, and if doesn't he doesn't show some sort of form here soon, I don't know why Alpine would keep him around, right? I mean, unless they actually believe in developing drivers, but it doesn't look like they do, right? They bought Colapinto's contract from Williams, for quite the hefty fee, allegedly, and it's for several years. And Pierre Gasly's not going anywhere; he's got a long-term contract. So, yeah, I think Doohan's got to be doing some real thinking.
For sure. Like I mean, I feel like you got to know that there's a little bit of like somebody breathing down your back. They're like it's just a matter of like Alpine's approach like to developing drivers hasn't always been like that like consistent where we can kind of like predict or see like what they're gonna do. Obviously making the changes after last year, but um, yeah, we'll see how it kind of evolves throughout the season. But I if he doesn't start giving like putting out some decent results, like props to Pierre because I feel like the Alpine car has no pace, like whatsoever. It just
Yeah.
like has no pace, but he's still having decent results. And if you're gonna like be a successful middle of the pack team that Alpine wants to be, right? They know they're not fighting for a driver's championship or they're not fighting for constructors. Like they're not doing any of those things. But if they're gonna have that, they need a second driver that's gonna be able to put that thing in 10th place, in ninth place, wherever it needs to be. And I just like it hasn't happened yet, but you know he does have that long term that contract as well. He's got that full time seat, but yeah, I think the expectations are, you're going to start to perform. And I would say, like, we can rediscuss this at the middle of the season too, but I think a lot, like, could change just over in that part of the paddock, just in this matter of the next, like, say 12 races. Kind of see where he's at. Do you want to continue to develop him, or do you want to now develop your young driver that, like you said, just adopted this contract that he has, where he's just kind of sitting there? And I'd be curious to know like what his contract is like against other reserve drivers as well, kind of to see like what they are paying him, and like is that an investment that is
Hmm.
truly like worth it in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, and like that's you kind of mentioned developing drivers, and it just got me thinking once again about. I know we're talking about Alpine, but it got me talking about thinking about Red Bull. They should have this massive advantage because they have direct control over four drivers.
Yeah.
Where Alpine has to go to Williams to kind of find a guy that they like, as another option, and they don't really have the ability to develop guys in house like Red Bull does in F1. They all have their driver academies, but you know, it, at the end of the day, it's got to be so invaluable, or at least it should be, to develop drivers in the way that you see fit with your team. And they're sharing all that data and ideas back and forth, but it just seems like they keep fumbling. I don't know. So I hope that I hope Doohan gets it together. Alpine obviously is not exactly highly competitive, but they seemed to kind of figure it out last year, and they ended the year on a positive note. So hopefully we get something going here, and we get some good back marker and midfield battles going on a more consistent basis with all these drivers involved.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Before we move into our next segment here, I want
Yeah,
to give a quick little shout out because I said that we would do this, but
it's true.
we did catch a little bit of a non F1 news type of things, but the NASCAR Xfinity Series, the Marine Corps 250 highlight that a lot of people did see, and it was actually well talked about. Though like NASCAR doesn't have that much attention all the time, especially the series itself, but. Oh my gosh! And the clip we're referring to is talking about the forceful crash on the last lap of the race, where one driver decides to completely cut a corner and directly ram into our first place car, which was unheard of. And I even kind of just sitting there. My dad wanted me to talk about this. With my dad, you don't really see those types of moves like in any racing, and overall it was just like that was one of the dirtiest drives I have ever seen from a race car driver before, right? So like
Yeah.
we see a unofficial kind of thing going on at the end where we see a complete crash at the end of the race, which is just wild to kind of see. But oh man, could you imagine if something like that happened in the world of F1?
Yeah, I mean the closest I can think to seeing that was two things last year when Akan almost took out Gasly in Monaco last year on the first lap, going into the tunnel, and then when Yuki dive bombed Ricardo after the first race of the year, when on team orders they switched positions and then they didn't switch back. Um, but yeah, I watched the video you sent me a couple times. Sammy Smith, I believe, is the driver who intentionally caused the wreck. He took out Taylor Gray, um, and I mean, it was he just turned into him. It was just like I can't win, so you can't finish. He was fined $25,000
Oh,
and 50 series points, which the most points you
well,
can get in a race is 60 points. So that's going to put a big dent in his championship hopes. But um, you know, in F1 they kind of just force each other off the road, or you get the Kevin Magnussen who's like, I'm going to take every shortcut possible and go as slow as possible to stay in front of you,
yeah.
and let my teammate get ahead. But thank goodness we don't have it in F1 because I feel like people be put in a very bad situation very
Oh
quickly
yeah.
with the much more open cockpit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it'd be much more dangerous, faster cars and trickier turns and everything. But yeah, it kind of reminded me like a little bit of like the skirmish between Max and Lewis in Silverstone.
Mm.
Just like taking that corner and one driver's just not willing to give up and they're just gonna go for it, and that's kind of what happened. But the crazy thing was like at the last turn of the race, the last corner of the race, he decided to just take out pretty much as many cars as he possibly could alongside with them, where the person in sixth place ends up winning the race. And sorry, I forgot his name, but going from
Austin
sixth place,
Hill.
Austin Hill. Okay,
Yeah.
first or sixth place to first place in the last corner of a race, which is just insane. So shout out to those of you who have been listening, and kind of throwing your suggestions out there. But um, in exciting news, let's refer back to our good friends Cadillac. We're extremely excited, for another team to be joining the paddock. Um, what are we thinking so far about Cadillac? Now they can pursue drivers. They can kind of go for those things. Where do you see them going in terms of like their direction of which drivers they're going to sign? Who do you think is going to take those seats and occupy those seats?
Yeah, I think they first got to sort out what do they want their first 5 years to look like, right? Are they going for, a hostile start where year one they're actually starting off hot and up at the top of the midfield? Are they going to try and build something more like Williams and bring things along with an eye on that next development cycle? Um, because the rumor right now, and I'm sure you've heard this one as well, is that uh, Checo Perez is in advanced talks to return to Formula One next year with Cadillac.
Yeah, honestly he would be my favorite at this point. Like
But
I,
why?
but why? Exactly. Like the thing is, I think that Cadillac is gonna go straight to business. I don't think they're gonna mess around whatsoever. They've already kind of like released their statements. We plan to be like one of the most competitive teams. So to me, that's saying they want to be in the top 5 teams, right? Which would be a really challenging, task to do. And it's not only a good opportunity for them to have a experienced driver like Sergio Perez, but also it's a good opportunity for him, right? Like I think like that for him in terms of like, do I think it's the right fit? I'm not sure, right? Like I don't know. Like we don't even know anything about their cars necessarily just yet, but if you want to have a competitive team, you're going to need an experienced driver, and Checo is that, right? Like he showed it like when he isn't in a Red Bull seat, right? He can make things happen, right? He can take a car from P20 and finish the race winning the Grand Prix. Like he has that in him, and it'll be like I hope that it happens just because of what we talked about earlier in the episode. I hope it happens to show that Checo is not as bad as people think he is, right? They forget about those first couple years that he was with Red Bull. Like, he's finishing P2. Yeah, but you got the world champion again,
Yeah.
probably a top 5 driver ever in his young career in the other car, right? So he was able to keep up with him. Of course, it was a rocket ship, and I don't think Cadillac's gonna have. Honestly, it was a spaceship. It wasn't even a rocket ship.
Yeah.
They're not gonna have that, but I think it's a good move for them. I honestly do. They could sign Liam Lawson and really get the Red Bull revenge team, the Avengers to come out and try to prove Red Bull wrong. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and then you could have Danny Rick as your, third driver, um, and really get them going. But so the reason I have a problem with it is just from expectations. I know I know they say they're going to come out. They want to be one of the most competitive teams. It's just reality shows that is so hard, right? Like you're gonna to be one of the top 5 teams. You're going to have to be faster than Aston Martin. You're going to have to be faster than Williams. Both of those teams have basically said, hey, we're really focused on next year. We've been doing this for a long time. Williams has a great driver lineup,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll know that car. They've raced at all the circuits. They know everything. They don't have to learn anything. They don't have to do anything for the first time. And Aston Martin has Adrian Newey. They have Fernando Alonso, and they have all of Lawrence Stroll's money to spend. And, you know, you're going to have to be faster than one, if not both of those two, unless Red Bull falls way off or, McLaren, Ferrari, or Mercedes has some unexpected fall from grace. which you just don't see happening, especially based upon the rumors coming out about the engine power and performance from Mercedes. Um, I don't see it happening. So what do you want to do? What's your goal, right? And I think if they're going for, hey, we want to be super competitive right away, great, sign Checo Perez. But then where does that leave you? He's not a long term answer, right? He's a 4 year, 5 year answer tops. And I mean, that's even stretching it. And who's your second driver, right? Are you getting a Franco Colapinto? Are you going to buy the contract from Alpine that Alpine bought from Williams, but they can recall him at any point in time? So that's not a great option to have. Are you going to bring up a Formula Two rookie? In which case, are you really going to be that competitive, right? And are you looking to fill the seat? The other obvious candidate, and the one that's been rumored quite a bit um, in the other world that we frequent with IndyCar, is Colton Herta,
Yeah.
right? And but that's still going to take time, and so I fear they're going to make the same mistake that they make that Red Bull made, right? And just trying to go pedal to the metal right away. If you
Yeah.
bring Checo in and you say, hey, we're gonna I want you to build this team, right, and teach Colton Herta or whoever that second driver is, Logan Sargent, whatever, um, and teach them like the ins and outs of Formula One. Great, right? But you better give Checo, a 2 to 3 year contract, and you're not even thinking about firing him. And you better give that second driver that room and time to grow. You're a brand new F1 team. You're not The odds of you hitting it out of the park right away are slim to none. And so as long as they have a plan in place to how they're going to grow and they're going to develop that driver, then I'm okay with them signing whoever. But if they just go, oh, we're going to sign Checo and we're going to be competitive, okay, cool. What's your long term answer? Who's your second driver and what does that look like? Because I think that's how you ultimately end up being competitive, right? Is
Yeah.
having that 30,000 foot view.
Yeah. You mentioned IndyCar, and you really got me thinking. What if we see Checo and Pato Award both on Cadillac? That'd be crazy. I don't know. I'm just thinking now. Now you got me. Now you got my thoughts all over the place. But wow, that would be really exciting. But I don't know if McLaren would ever let go of
Give
Pato
me
Award.
Alex Palou and Pato Award, or give me Alex Palou and Colton Herta or Award and Herta, and just grow the team. Like go
Yeah,
with two young guys. If you just say, hey, you know what, we're really committed to figuring this out, and we think we got two great dudes, or choose one of them and Checo,
yeah.
right? But who you? So you're if you could choose any two drivers from a for Cadillac for next year, who would they be? They do have to be living in real people.
Living in real people, so
Yeah.
I can't have Michael Schumacher. You
Well,
know,
he's living and he's a real person, but I don't think that he's going to be coming out of
I
his
just want
retirement.
prime Michael Schumacher to be on that team.
Yeah,
But
no, it's got to be feasible
um, okay, I don't.
in the sense that they would be driving a car.
I think they go the route of like some younger guys. I would love to see Daniel Ricciardo make a comeback. I would. Um, do I necessarily think that he has the ability to do that? But I not necessarily. In terms of like I'm gonna pull the age card here, and you have a different probably a different lens on it than that, but um, right, I think it would be really interesting. I mean, I want Daniel Ricciardo. That's my one pick. I'll pick Daniel
Okay.
Ricciardo, just in the sense of he has been on so many different teams, right? Just in the past, what 10 no, not 10 years, 7 years, right? He's seen all these different kind of dynamics. You kind of need a guy like that. Like I don't know, like it's tricky for me to even answer that question because like for me this is like an approach that like Haas took last year, right? By having Kevin Magnussen, having Nico Hülkenberg, having
Hmm.
those guys, right? Like that's one approach that they could take. They could take two really experienced veteran drivers, throw them in the car, get as much data, as much in the analytics they could run year one, right? And then try to run it back one more year to see if there's any improvements with the car, and then try to get some younger drivers and try to like kind of target those guys. To me, that's probably the right way to go about things, but also that's what Haas just did. Hasn't really proven to be the best strategy in the world. But I mean, we got to give that a little bit more time. I don't know. I don't think I can actually give you an answer on that, but maybe once I hear your ideas, I can bounce off you a little bit there.
Yeah, that's fair. The two experienced drivers has not worked out. Um, Got to keep the puns going. My ideal pairing, from a comedy standpoint, would be Logan Sargent and Nick DeVries. um, but my actual team that I would want, and I think would be fun, would be Botas
Mm,
and Yuki.
mm,
And I think that, Yuki's still young enough that he could be that long-term option,
mm-hmm.
um, for a Cadillac. He's only 24 years old,
Yeah.
right? He won't turn 25 until, I think May. So he'd be 20, he'd be 25 going into next season. Um, Botas has been around, he's seen what works and what doesn't work. He's driven championship winning cars with Mercedes. He drove the Kick Sauber Steak, whatever car it is. And that didn't work, right? But the other thing that I think would be beneficial is he also drove that car when it was more competitive. I think he had 58 points his first year, and then it kind of just nosedived from there. And so, I mean, he's a pair of steady hands that has been around for a long time, could kind of mentor Yuki, and then maybe slide into that third driver role when you identify a second driver that you're like, hey, we might have something here. Whether that's a Franco Colapinto, or somebody that maybe isn't even on the grid yet.
Yeah. How exciting would it be if Max stuck it out though for the rest of the year and
Went to Cadillac.
all of a sudden makes the craziest decision a world champion could ever make and just go to a brand new team. Like it would be so phenomenal to watch. That would be the best like TV in the world. But yeah, no, I like the way that you're kind of approaching that, thinking about that. I I see Valtteri Bottas as like a very good option for them, right? Like you mentioned, like he's seen so many different types of cars, right? Especially the last couple of years, he's seen all those things, and
Mm-hmm.
he was also on one of the best constructed teams ever, right? Like being involved in that run with Mercedes, like it's just like he knows the deal and he knows how to get the job done. So I would see that as like a pretty good pick for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was a two-time world champion runner-up in F1, so
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing to turn your nose up at. He knows how to drive a car, um, and he knows what it should be doing. Um, Unfortunately, the steak car did nothing like that. But
Right.
yeah, I think it'd be a good time. Oh,
For sure.
yeah.
All right, buddy.
All right. Yeah, I think that about does it, right?
That
When
about
are
does
when are
it.
we
Yeah.
when are we talking again?
We are gonna be talking again on Friday. So we are gonna have our next episode. This you guys will be getting this and hearing this on Thursday. We'll have kind of like a back to back day. Almost it'll either we'll kind of go through our race preview for Suzuka in just a few days. So on Friday we'll have that next episode. Depending on how how sleepy I am, we'll see how it goes with that. But maybe check Spotify, check your Apple. Right, we are now on Apple Podcast at the same title, the Rear Wing Report. Okay, so if you are a Apple person, use Apple Podcast, you can now refer to us there. We are also going to be starting to post our video podcast up on our YouTube page that you guys can kind of see down linked here. which will just be the Rear Wing Report. Okay, so same socials pretty much all over the place, but we'll get that preview out around Friday or early Saturday morning. Hopefully not that late because we're getting deep into the race weekend at that point. Yeah. So yeah, so we'll get some bold predictions. We'll see whose takes are really gonna be bad, whose are gonna be good. We likely know who's gonna outperform the other, but that's all right. So yeah, we'll get that all squared away. But yeah, just one more time, make sure you follow our socials, Rear Wing Report, pretty much on every type of social platform you can think of. And we're going to start getting our presence out there a little bit more. So tell your friends, tell your grandma. I don't care who it is. Tell your friend's grandma. Tell your friend's grandma to listen to the Rear Wing Report.
And download, rate, and subscribe.
Yes, sir.
Leave some comments as well.
All right, buddy.
All right, big dog.
Been great.